Today is Sunday, July 13th, 2025, and this is episode 314, which I guess that makes this the pie episode.
Indeed. And yet,
of the Defensive Security Podcast.
I have no pie. Fail.
But yeah,
somebody dropped the ball.
I hear either. I just realized
we need to fire our logistics coordinator.
Yeah. Got bad news about that. So anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. It's good to see you all again. A quick reminder that the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and not those of our employers. Those of us who are employed or those of us who would like to be employed. Hint, hint, hint. And then also, thank you very much to our Patreon sponsors who are amazing. Just want to remind everybody that we provide some extra content for our Patreon sponsors. So we've winnowed it down to basically we cover three topics for the free version, and then we do two extras for our Patreon sponsors as a reward. And if you would like to subscribe to that, you can go to our Patreon site. It's patreon.com/defensivesec. And you can follow along there. I think you can actually buy individual episodes for $5, but I don't think anybody will ever do that. That seems kind of, but I put it out there in case somebody wants. The merch shop is still a work in progress. I've completely failed. Life kind of has been happening.
Yeah, no worries, man.
We'll get there. And then the other thing is I think we're going to make one more change to benefit our Patreon sponsors because we love you so much. What we will be doing, and I think the logistics of exactly how we're going to make the transition is a TBD yet, but we are going to start releasing the show a week ahead for our sponsors. So our Patreon sponsors will get a full episode that has the extra content, and it'll be available to them a week ahead of time. We were consternating over whether that was the responsible thing to do, based on the fact that we talk about security news. And I think the reality is we don't, the stuff we talk about, I think, is a little bit orthogonal to breaking news. And obviously, if the crap hit the fan, and there was something that made sense to talk about, we would
you break out that handy that green screen of yours and do some on the site reporting.
That's right. I would get my dumpster fire microphone.
Yep.
Oh,
ready
fancy
to go to any cyber emergency.
That's right. I can report from the dumpster fire at any moment. Anyhow, that is the housekeeping for today. So let's jump into some stories. The first one today comes from theregister.com, and the title here is "Now Everybody But Citrix Agrees That Citrix Bleed 2 is Under Exploit." So for those of you who haven't been paying attention, there was a new Citrix, I won't call it a 0-day, it was a CVSS 9.3, which, it's not remote code execution, but it does provide information disclosure sufficient to steal authentication tokens off the device, which would allow an actor to effectively hijack existing in-process sessions, which is
pretty bad.
Really not awesome. And you don't necessarily need, remote code execution at that point because, you can just take over a legitimate session. So the implication there obviously is that a bad actor can connect to these NetScalers, obtain authentication tokens, hijack sessions, and effectively allow them to act as an authenticated user regardless of how that authentication works. And so you can have the most fancy, complicated multi-factor authentication scheme ever, this kind of bypasses all that because they're stealing the token that is generated after that authentication takes place. So pretty bad stuff. Now, it's called Citrix Blade 2 because this is really the second time this has happened in about 2 years. What's novel in this instance is that, as the title kind of alludes to, everybody in the industry, including CISA, by the way, agrees that this vulnerability is under active exploitation, but Citrix still is saying
nothing to see.
We don't see any evidence of exploitation. I thought it was, look, there's nothing particularly novel about, this. It's happened before. I still say, to the extent you can, this should probably not be exposed to the internet. That said, one of the functions that is exploitable is a VPN server, which is by design something that is designed to be on your perimeter. So even that bit of guidance doesn't hold up super well in this instance.
It just reminds me so much. It reminds me so much of the Iraqi information minister. There are no U.S. forces in Baghdad. Tank rolls by.
The tank goes by. Yes. Yeah. So I think where the challenge here is, and I mentioned this on the show last week, there are certain kinds of vulnerabilities that you really shouldn't wait on, right? Every organization on the planet has an SLA, and it's almost always based on severity. And, typically it's 30 days for a high and 60 or 90 for a medium and 180 or whatever for a low. There are instances where you really should have something that allows you or forces you really to adjust that schedule based on severity. Most organizations don't have a huge number of these devices, so it's not like you've got to go and patch 300 scalers, right? For most organizations, that's not, even where I was at before, we had a reasonable number of NetScalers to patch.
You're also assuming that they know where they are and that they have good inventory of them.
Well, that is an awesome point. That's an awesome point. But the challenge is that it looks like it was not long after the patch was released that exploitation started. There were working exploits published in early July. The actual patch was pushed out on June 17th of 2025, and I'm trying to see exactly when. Yeah, there's looks like there's there's indications of attack attempts back to June 23rd, which was like a week after the patch was released, but a week before the exploit proof of concepts were released. So this is one of those situations where, look, I'm just throwing it out there. If I had a NetScaler or a Palo Alto or a Cisco or, insert major firewall vendor's name here, and a vulnerability that has certain attributes about it, and patch that has certain attributes about it is released, I would be very apt to override that time frame and get them applied as soon as possible. And then, like I said last time, I would also contemplate, under certain circumstances, declaring an incident, right? I don't know, I'm not saying that well, but, assuming that your device may have been hacked while it was not patched, because these things are they're getting owned constantly. And I think the threat actors, they've just worn a path using these vulnerabilities on these devices. So that's Jerry's take. What say you?
It's frustrating to me that the vendor is not helping by ignoring or denying that active exploitation is going on. To your point, every organization I've worked with that I've been involved with vulnerability management has some sort of SLA, but that SLA is usually influenced by certain prioritization factors, one of which is, are there known exploits in the wild? And if it's known exploits in the wild, especially on a perimeter-facing device, it goes from a multi-day or multi-week SLA to a emergency SLA. And to have this sort of like lack of clarity from the vendor is frustrating when I'm trying to manage against that. And, it makes me a little leery of trusting Oracle. Not that we haven't had plenty of reasons to have
Citrix,
issues with trusting Oracle.
be clear.
Sorry.
Shouldn't trust Oracle
Citrix.
either. Just to be very clear.
Right.
Shouldn't trust
You're
them
right.
either.
Citrix. Who owns Citrix? Are they cell phone?
I think they're still, I don't think Broadcom has bought them yet.
Yeah, fair enough. You're right. Citrix, my bad. Either way, the vendor not being transparent and open with the industry saying, hey, we're seeing exploit activity out in the wild. And also, here's proof of concept code that was released publicly. Yeah, but to your point, this class of system that is public facing should probably have a higher sensitivity, a higher prioritization anyway, if you're trying to tier your prioritization. And the easy answer here for everyone is just patch everything all the time. This is the problem that we've discussed ad nauseum over the years, is that doesn't work. As much as we try, as much as we want to, as much as we say it, as much as for the last 30 years, that approach has failed. So we've got to have some prioritization. We've got to try and pick and choose. Patching against vulnerabilities are most likely to bite us. And this is a good example of one that's definitely could. And one of the ways we do that is a lot of vulnerability management tools will do things like, is it on the known exploit list? Is it, and I'm glad CIS is doing it without the vendor's agreement, but shame on Citrix for not being more transparent.
I think that's one of the nuances of this story here is that there, and by the way, this particular story was written, I think 2 or 3 days ago. They're the latest, I can talk, I promise. The latest quote from Citrix, I think, was on June 26th, when the VP of NetScaler said there is no evidence to suggest exploitation of that vulnerability. So I don't know if their position maybe has changed in the past couple of days, but what is concerning to me, if you are a customer of whatever product and the vendor of that product is giving you information that is kind of contrary to the reality of the situation, that creates a problem. And this isn't the first time we've seen this. Like I remember, I think it was Fortinet? It was one of the big firewalls, and I apologize to Fortinet if it wasn't you. But I remember there was a gnarly vulnerability, and it was pretty easy to exploit, but it was very difficult to determine whether or not you actually were,
Mm-hmm.
There was this kind of this wave after wave after wave of different guidance out of the supplier. There is nothing wrong. Oh, well, maybe there's something wrong, but it's okay if you reimage. Well, reimaging doesn't work. You have to use this special tool that we provide you. Oh, well, we just figured out that special tool doesn't work. You actually have to RMA the device. That happened. That played out over the course of like a month. And so obviously you're kind of beholden to what the vendor says in certain circumstances like that one. But when you've got a lot of the industry is saying like this thing is being exploited, you have to temper the information you're getting from your vendor back a little bit. And that's right. That was one of the topics I wanted to cover here.
Yeah,
like
it's
a tough one. In my former role, what we would do is we were maybe anomalous to the industry, but we had bought a lot. We had lots of different types of technology, but we also bought a lot of each individual type of technology. And so we would have almost weekly discussions with each one of the vendors talking about like what's going on, what vulnerabilities have you released, what's coming up, what should we be worried about. And if you were in a situation where you have that with Citrix and Citrix is whispering into your ear, oh, there's there's no evidence of this being exploited, that will lead you astray possibly.
Well, and I think you had the advantage of being at a very large customer that they were willing to give that sort of wake.
Yes.
That's not common, unfortunately.
I agree. Well, I mean, I've worked in smaller shops too, so I'm sympathetic. But point is, even in instances where you are large like that, you can fall into a false sense of knowledge.
That's true. That's true.
All right. So moving on to our next story. I don't think we've ever had a story from this place before. It's from Axios. I think most people are familiar with Axios, but the title here is How Scattered Spider Hackers Are Wreaking Havoc on Corporate America.
Little clickbaity.
A little clickbaity. But last week I think I called it Snuggly Spider, so obviously I was wrong. It's Scattered Spider. What I found interesting is the characterization of this particular actor, and it seemed interesting to me on two dimensions. One dimension is it feels a lot like old school Anonymous. It's like more of a collective.
Mm-hmm.
It's a decentralized collective than like a well-structured group. But on the other hand, it apparently does have a lot of structure. Rationalizing those two concepts in my mind is a little odd. Like they do have apparently the concept of specialization. They have people whose job is to basically trick help desk. The way that their MO is that they will contact the help desk of their victim company, and they will try to trick the help desk of that victim to resetting their credentials. They'll pose as as an employee, and they'll do lots of sneaky things. Like they'll do SMS spoofing. They'll clone your SMS or clone your SIM card and things like that, which is another example of why phone-based authentication is not a great system any longer. But they also have more advanced teams who focus on, I presume, kind of initial exploitation once they have the credentials, and then they have another group who's focused on kind of the post exploitation stuff, so like deploying ransomware, and they actually talk about how in this particular threat actor's instance, it takes about 24 hours from the time they gain access until the time they've started deploying their ransomware, which is a little fast. Anomalous in the world. Now, they also focus on attacking hypervisors, which is a common tactic I have seen personally, and also something that we've been seeing a lot in the news lately. And it's interesting because it's interesting for two reasons. One reason is that all the licensing hoopla that's going on is causing organizations to not patch, like they're using, old vulnerable versions of ESX because the license fees are just stupid expensive, and they're no longer allowed to apply patches under threat of license audits. And then the other is that there are no tools. So the way that this actor works is they will, they're trying to steal legitimate credentials and then come in through legitimate channels. So they're stealing. They'll focus on, let's say, I'm making this up hypothetically, like they'll find a VMware administrator that works at their target company, and it's easy to do because like there's a whole Rolodex of every freaking ESX administrator in the world called LinkedIn. They just look to see who their ESX admins are, and then they pretend to be that person with the help desk. They steal their credentials. And then ultimately, they're attempting to log into that company's ESX servers using credentials they've stolen. And they attack ESX in particular because they know ESX doesn't have any kind of security software on it. And so they're actually deploying their ransomware in ESX because they know that they know there's no CrowdStrike there.
Well, that's why they don't crash.
Just all the guests crashed. Which, by the way, we blew through the 1 year anniversary. We should have held a party or something.
We should. And I don't think we covered it, but Microsoft just finally announced how they're going to change their approach to security tools in the kernel to stop something like that from happening again, which we speculated was going to happen. We'll see how that plays out and how they will not get caught up in an antitrust violation with Defender having access to the Microsoft kernel that other things don't. So we'll see how that all plays out, but that's a side topic.
Yes.
So a couple of takeaways I got from this article was interesting. One of the things they do is they go after help desk to do employee password resets. And that is a very interesting psychological case of employee helpfulness versus security, friction versus productivity. And how do I know that the person calling me is who they say they are? And how do I verify it? And how much of a pain in the butt do I want to be as help desk versus just turning and burning and getting a password reset? And it's a very interesting problem. I don't think a lot of companies do this well. I don't think a lot of companies have some sort of believable, strong, firm, enforceable, reliable methodology for identifying an employee aside from username and password. And I think a lot of companies should invest in that, and not through SMS, right? Because we know that is a very common trait these days. However, side note, different cell phone vendors are doing this. In the States, recently, AT&T introduced something called account locking, which is kind of like a credit freeze that you need to have your account PIN, special PIN, to unlock the account to migrate a SIM or an eSIM to another device. So it helps fight that a little bit. You can lock down that SIM to that device, and then if you want to upgrade or change the device, you've got to unlock it with additional security and such, which is not a bad thing to look at, especially for your executives. See if your cell phone provider offers something similar with their devices. But back to employee helpfulness, help desk may not know. And another potential defense that I've seen is device level authentication, that you limit the amount of devices that can come into your SSO provider, assuming you have one, to devices that have some known criteria, like a known client certificate that isn't easy for a third party to steal. So even if they reset the password, you've got another layer of authentication there with the device. And if they don't have the right device, which most attackers wouldn't have, they might not be able to get in. Again, it's a pain, but it gives you layers to defend against this sort of attack against. But yeah, I think help desk being helpful is what's being used against us here.
The way I've seen a place work previously was if you called the help desk and the help desk agent wasn't able to affirmatively identify you, they would reset your password, but they would provide the password to your manager, not to you.
Interesting. Well, that's great until you've got a ton of contractors who are overseas.
I'm not saying that it's optimal.
Which actually, now that I think about it, contractors are a problem regardless in this scenario. Contractors are a tough one. Yeah, no, I like the concept, like provide it to the manager and then assume and hope that the manager knows their employees well enough and can authenticate.
Well, I think that's the assumption. But, as I sit here thinking about it, how long is it going to be before somebody can pull off a deep fake, and portray?
You can do it now.
Yeah.
A good use of buying our episodes for $5 is then you'd have some deep fake material. No? I mean, you can get them for free. But
train your models. That's right.
Just trying. And I'm just trying to drive some revenue, cover our costs. Anyway, yeah, I mean, certainly. You're raising the bar. You're making it harder. You're making it more complicated. But there you go.
Yeah. So their advice here is, I guess a couple things. One is to, as we just talked about, improve how strict your ID verification is. So when somebody calls the help desk, you should really take a close look at what improvements you can make. And that's going to be very situational. There's lots of options there, lots of costs, lots of cost options. So I think that's going to be based on your risk tolerance and different attributes about your organization. I think it's safe to say, like, if you are using SMS, anything to do, they mentioned SMS, but anything to do with a phone, I would just say, like, don't rely on anything that is associated with a phone number. It's bad news. And then they also point out, which I think is a good call out, that it isn't just you and your organization that is susceptible to this. If you have business partners or vendors or customers or whatever that are connecting into your network, consider that they may befall the same problem. Like, so even if they're not, using your help desk, they may have their own help desk. And if they're falling for this, their security weakness can impart problems onto you. So be on the lookout for that as well. Make sure that anybody that's connecting into your organization, accessing your information, has the right kind of control set around this as well. And my guess is we're going to see this threat actor continue to evolve and refine their tactics. But one of the overarching points of this article is that this threat actor has been active for a long time. They've been acutely in the news over the past, I would say 3 or 4 months, having attacked a bunch of high profile companies like insurance companies, brand name companies. And the net point of this article is their tactics are kind of well trodden stuff, but they're still working like super effectively.
Yeah, they don't need to get more sophisticated if it works.
Right. So I think that's the takeaway. Yeah, we have work to do. All right, our next story and our last one for for our free listeners comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is "Employee Gets $920 for Credentials Used in $140 Million Bank Heist."
Heck of a return on investment.
It is. When you think about it, that's a pretty good return. So the story here is that there's an employee that worked for a technology provider in Brazil. The provider's name is C&M. I don't know what that stands for. But they provide, quote, financial connectivity solutions to banks and financial institutions in Brazil, including, by the way, to the Brazilian central bank. So that's, I think, where things kind of went awry. The story goes that the threat actor here met up with an employee who I'm sure they found through LinkedIn, because, like, where else would you find it?
Mm-hmm.
At a bar or a restaurant, and they met up with him. I guess they started chatting him up as he was leaving, and convinced this person to do business with them. And so for roughly $1,000 US, which, by the way, is not, that's $1,000 US. It's probably worth more in Brazil, although with the exchange rate lately, maybe not so much more. Sorry. I'm feeling that right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, they paid him $920 to provide access to his accounts. Now they also paid him, by the way, another $1,850 to run some commands. So they fed him some commands to run on his, I don't know if it was on his laptop or on some other systems in the environment, but for doing that, he got another almost $2,000. So it was close to $3,000 that he got for all of this.
Do we know how complicated these commands are? Is it like a dollar per character typed?
I don't know.
How do they price that out?
I don't know. I don't know what the pricing model is there. That would be interesting.
Just curious how much you rent out your keyboard for.
This employee tried to hide his activity by changing his mobile phone every 15 days, but he was still arrested. And it appears, by the way, that that one of the banks is touting their amazing threat intel abilities to detect this, and that's why they were able to catch him and figure out who it was. But they still stole, quite a lot of money, which is the story talks about here, has been at this point mostly exchanged for cryptocurrency, because, of course, I mean, what else is cryptocurrency for?
As you love to say.
If not fraud, then what? Look, we're starting to see more. I don't know if it's happening more often, or if it's just like it's the shark attack thing where somebody reports on it and then everybody starts reporting on similar things. Like there was a similar issue with Coinbase, as they mentioned, where some of Coinbase's contractors were bribed to steal customer data. I think when we have employees who are in sensitive positions, it's important to have the right kind of monitoring in place to cover the risk that they pose. Not that we should distrust our employees inherently, but this stuff does happen. And I would say, in particular, when you have people who are unhappy or what have you, it can increase or decrease the urgency with which you do this. And obviously, everybody's got to figure out what their risk appetite is for themselves. In the context of a financial institution, it struck me as concerning that a threat actor was able to pull this off strictly by buying this person's credentials. Now, again, maybe I'm underselling that. Maybe this, the commands that he ran, created a reverse shell that facilitated the access, but there should be no way that somebody would be able to log into their VPN from an unknown device. And if they tried, that should trigger some alert that would cause an investigation to figure out what the heck is going on.
One would hope, but I did find it was kind of interesting. One of the quotes in the article from this company, patting themselves on the back, saying, in a statement to Brazilian media, CNN, that's the company that was impacted here, emphasized that its security systems remain secure and the attack was only possible through social engineering, not a security flaw. I would humbly submit that them being susceptible to social engineering attack is a security flaw, right? So they're trying to say that the technical aspect was fine and this was a person aspect, but this feeds into that, the person was at fault. Well, I mean, here they were bribed and such, but to your point, if we are doing our job as well as we can, there's an aspect of this of anticipating that our people may become insider threats. And how do you detect and limit that? And I'd say that them dismissing this out of hand with that wasn't a security flaw, that was a social engineering attack, there's nothing that can be done about it, I disagree with. There are ways that you can detect it, limit it, control the blast radius, with the assumption that somebody may potentially go rogue on you. Not that you want to distrust your employees, but especially if you're managing finances for multiple other organizations, I think it's your duty to assume that and build monitoring to cope for that sort of eventuality.
It's kind of surprising, honestly. I don't know what the details are, but it happened, right? It happened. And now, to their credit, they apparently identified that it happened, but that it was identified after $140 million were stolen. It's good that they were able to track it down, who actually did it. That's good. But, the fact that they didn't have controls in place sufficient to detect kind of as it was happening, the theft of $140 million.
Right.
For an organization that apparently connects the Brazilian central bank to other banks is concerning to me. That, I mean, look, I get it. We can't all have user activity monitoring and stuff like that in our environments, but at some level, we as security people have to tune the control set to the risk that we pose. And honestly, this is why regulations and audits and whatnot are so problematic, right? Because that's those are intended to help ensure that you've properly calibrated your view of the risk and the things that you should be doing to cover that risk. And I would assert that I don't think that happened in this instance.
Yeah, I would agree.
Again, totally flying by the seat of my pants here. I mean, maybe they did, and I'm thinking about it wrong.
Well, we don't have a lot of details, but I think there's still a good takeaway of, hey, here's a good example of think about how this might happen in your environment and how would you deal with it. Yeah,
I guess I'll also go on to say after a certain point, insider threats kind of you can kind of abstract away how it started, right? So in this instance, the bad actor was bribed to provide his credentials, and then he was bribed to run some commands. But it's not hard to think that, well, that same set of circumstances might have happened if he clicked on the wrong link and not been bribed, right? And so that I would encourage everybody to kind of think about it from that lens. Like, you can kind of divide, it's the whole kill chain, which I hate that freaking phrase still all these years later. You can still kind of think about them in distinct phases. And, even if you were to find a way to ensure people weren't susceptible to being bribed, you haven't necessarily killed the whole insider threat problem, because that can materialize in lots of different ways.
Game it out is one way I would say, is do tabletop exercises and try to find those points where you could intercept that attack scenario in some way.
Yep. All right. So that is the story, or that is the show for our free listeners. For those of you who are Patreon sponsors, we're going to keep going in just a minute, but we're going to say goodbye to everybody else. You can find the links to the stories we talked about on our website at defensivesecurity.org. Just look for episode 314. I'll make sure to put a piece of pie on there or something for you. You can find me on the Fediverse. It's at Jerry at infosec.exchange. And where can people find you?
I am on both X and infosec.exchange at Lerg, Lerg.
And one, just a shout out. I feel like I should, give ourselves a plug. We have a YouTube channel. Like, if you haven't seen that yet, I think it's the best damn YouTube channel out there. Like, you can see us in ever.
Wow.
Ever.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
All right.
We have got a lot of stuff posted out there. Anyway, I think it's at Defensive Podcasts is the handle there. But you can just search on YouTube for Defensive Security Podcast, and you'll find us. Anyway, with that, we'll talk to all of you again.